the local forecast later on this watch. The Miami City Commission today approved an additional $42 million for
Dr. Sleep is a 2019 horror film directed by Mike Flanagan and is the sequel to The Shining. Alright, let's talk about Dr. Sleep, you guys. You've been requesting it, and I have been waiting for this film for quite a while. So, Mike Flanagan directed Dr. Sleep, and you may know Mike Flanagan's name from a few different places. He directed the Netflix show The Haunting of Hill House. He also directed Occultist, which came back in 2014, that came out. And then you had Gerald's Game, which was another Stephen King adaptation, which came out several years ago, which a lot of people really liked. I found it a little too gory, but overall it had a good presentation to it. So I was excited to see what he would do with this story, which is of course adapted from a 2013 book that Stephen King wrote called Dr. Sleep, which tells the story of Danny Torrance. And this film is a sequel to Stephen King's novel of The Shining, and also a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's film, The Shining, which happens to be not only my favorite horror film of all time, but my favorite film of all time. So, no pressure or anything. Obviously, The Shining is a film that's very close to me. I love that film to death. It's my favorite film. I've watched it so many times. Obviously, I have to take off the nostalgia goggles. I have to separate myself from The Shining when it comes to reviewing this film for you, because there's no way you can raise the bar from what Kubrick did back in 1980, and I understand that. And obviously that's a lot to put on Mike Flanagan. But I have to say, just initial thoughts here, I really enjoyed Dr. Sleep a lot more than I thought I would have. So when I heard they were making a sequel to The Shining, my first thought was, ah! No! Because whenever you make a sequel to a beloved film, you're gonna have that reaction. The trailer came out, and I'm like, alright, this doesn't look half bad. The only thing that really troubled me, well, two things that really troubled me, were the blue tint to the entire trailer, and the light-up glowing eyes that the villain lady, who is Rose the Hat, had in the trailer. And those things still bother me even when watching the film, and that's one of my biggest gripes, is just that blue tint. Why did they need to add that? The Shining is such a beautiful film. Its cinematography takes my breath away every time I watch it. And Kubrick was a master at lighting and everything. So to see a sequel to that with this odd blue filter over the entire thing, it makes the movie so much more duller than it needed to be. Because the story, in my opinion, was actually quite interesting. I was invested in the story. I found it entertaining throughout. This film's longer than The Shining itself, about 2 hours and 30 minutes, whereas Kubrick's was about 2 hours 17. But I found myself engaged in it. But that blue filter kept me going, this is dull for some reason, because that color would not let me get that boring feeling out of my head. But I have to look past that. I understand that's not a big thing, but it is, because that's the presentation of your movie. Going past that, I'm on a side tangent about blue filters, but it bothered me. But story-wise, I really liked it. It takes place, it starts in 1980. You have Wendy and Danny escaping from the Overlook Hotel, where, of course, Jack went nutty and tried to murder his family with an axe, just like the Gradys. They move to Florida, and they try to start their life up again, but obviously there's trauma there, and we cut to Dan Torrance, now an adult, played by Ian McGregor, who, man, he does a great job in this movie. He is so good. Ian McGregor Danny Torrance now has to deal with the repercussions of his father's abuse and his alcoholism, while also having to help young shiners, particularly a young girl named Abra, like Abracadabra, from a cult led by this woman who wants to suck out the shine from these kids. It's really odd. When you start saying the plot out loud, it's really bizarre. Essentially, Rose the Hat, who is this cult leader, wants to suck out this dust that occurs when a shiner dies, and that gives her and the cult life. And Danny has to protect the young shiners, like he was when he was a kid, from this evil cult. That's essentially the plot. But it involves, not getting into too many spoilers, but it involves going back to the Overlook, as you saw in the trailer, and confronting his trauma as a kid. And just, wow. I mean, it was quite an experience to watch. Obviously, I had to take my nostalgia goggles off and really analyze the film, because when you start playing Midnight the Stars and You, and you have the Grady twins, and you have Ullman's office, you have all this stuff that's so special to me, I obviously have to look back and say, what is this film trying to say? And I really did like it. Danny's progression throughout the story, I liked quite a bit. It added quite a bit to his lore, especially now being an adult, because in The Shining, he mostly just sucks his thumb and mimes his little finger around as Tony, which they talk about too, and Mr. Halloran's in the movie, and they do a good job with explaining the shine a bit more. I didn't entirely get what the shiner dust was. When a shiner dies, they essentially emit this dust that comes out of them, out of their breath, and they kind of smoke it up. It's really weird. And I'm like, what the heck? And I didn't quite get what that meant for the cult until the very end. You kind of start piecing it together. Oh, okay, that's what that means. But presentation was very good. I think Mike Flanagan has an eye for this. Besides that blue tint, which I'm not letting go. But it still was a good movie. The story was understandable, despite Stephen King's kind of weird things he throws in. It didn't have a lot to do with The Shining, which I think is fine, because there's really nothing more you can add to The Shining. It really doesn't need a sequel in any way, but the way they handled it was well done. It respected Stephen King's novel and his work he put into the story, and it also respected the visuals and the amazing work done by Kubrick and his adaptation of that story, and combined it into a package which I think will satisfy fans and satisfy horror lovers. Although it's not really that scary, it does offer something for everybody, and I think if you like The Shining, you will enjoy Dr. Sleep, not just for that fan service stuff, but also for the deeper story at play. And I probably will watch this film again, no doubt. With that said, I'm going to give Dr. Sleep a 4 out of 5 skulls on the R.I.P. Reviews rating scale. I'm going to get into some spoiler talk right now, but thank you for watching. Click away if you don't want to hear anything from Dr. Sleep. So Dan Torrance, has to, in order to stop Rose the Hat, go back to the Overlook Hotel and unlock these memories and these tragedies that happened to him as a kid. And the Overlook essentially takes that shiner dust and sucks it right out of Rose and just completely obliterates her, because it's the Overlook Hotel. And you see all of the iconic imagery from The Shining come back. You have the Grady twins, you have Mr. Grady, you have the "great party, isn't it" guy. You know, to me, that's kind of like dangling a shiny object in front of a cat. Like when you show the Millennium Falcon in the new Star Wars movies, nerds are going to flip out. I love The Shining. Obviously, that stuff makes me excited. And even looking past that, I think the narrative was well done. I think there are some things to improve with it. Some scenes kind of dragged a bit, but I like a slow burn and I'm okay with that, but some things could have been trimmed just a tad. Especially the cult stuff I felt like got a little repetitive, like, okay, they're going after another kid, and another kid, and another kid. All right, let's get to Danny again. And I wish they would have focused more on Dan's comparison with his father. I feel like when he was struggling with the alcohol abuse, that was interesting to me because it was making him go back to those days and he wanted to not be like his father. That stuff was great. I wish they would have focused on more of that rather than all the cult stuff and the shooting out scenes. That was weird. But again, still a good film. Being a big Shining fan, I was nervous I wasn't going to like this movie. And of course, it's not comparable to a Kubrick standard, but it is still really well done. And I'm excited to see what other films Mike Flanagan does. Perhaps even some more Stephen King adaptations, which I would be fine with. So we'll see. But with that said, I liked Dr. Sleep, and I want to know from you all, because I know you all love The Shining too, what did you think about this film? I think a lot of people liked it. It's unfortunate that the box office was so poor for Warner Brothers, because it shows almost a disinterest in The Shining, which isn't true, but I think some people, like myself, were nervous that it was going to disrespect what The Shining was all about. Anyways, that's all from me. Thank you for watching, and remember, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.